So tonight I want to start a new series. I mentioned it to you 2 weeks ago on codependency. So here's my thing for it. If you leave me, can I come with you? Which is codependency in a nutshell. If I leave you, can I come? If you leave me, can I come with you? I've been teaching codependency for 15 years now. And if you know me, I'm always learning, and every time I teach it in workshops, I get new insights and questions get asked that take me in a little different direction. And so this series is going to be kind of a blend of some of the older stuff that I've taught, but a lot of the newer stuff that I've put together over the last couple of years. And it's probably going to be an 8 to 10 week series just because there's so much material that I want to cover. And so let me just say a couple introductory things. Codependency is a term that has become overworked, and so a lot of people hear it and they just tune it out because they think they know what it means. And it's kind of gained its own baggage. And a lot of people really don't understand it, and that's part of why I want to do this series. But secondly, if you were to come to React on any given week, there would not be a week that would pass where codependency wouldn't come up. It is one of the most talked about things in recovery. It is one of the questions I get most frequently by clients in recovery. And so what I have seen is an extremely important topic. Not just because I get asked about it a lot, but what I have found over the years is a lot of people come into Finding Freedom and React and they think that drugs and alcohol is their main addiction. But what I have learned is that probably an addiction to a person is probably a greater addiction. And that is a codependency thing. And what I have found is if they don't deal with that, that will keep them not only messed up in their personal life and in their relationships, but that will keep taking them to relapse to drugs and alcohol. And I would say that probably the greatest cause of relapse that I have seen is codependent relationships. It does so much damage. And it is one of the hardest things to deal with because it plays off of natural human needs, relationships, love, belonging. And so when people come into recovery and they're lonely and they're hurting and they're broken, they long for a relationship and usually end up in a romantic one that is codependent, and it just makes life worse for them and leads to a relapse. And so it is, in my mind, one of the most important topics for people to face in their recovery if they have a chance of making it in recovery, but also if they want to have a healthy life and to have healthy relationships and to have their kids grow up seeing mom or dad getting healthy, not just keeping the old crisis cycle happening over and over again, which does a lot of damage to them. The next thing that is important for me in explaining this is there's lots of teaching about codependency that's out there, but I don't think you can really understand codependency till you understand complex trauma. Do you realize that everybody basically that is codependent has complex trauma? And so it is one of the main symptoms that come out of complex trauma. And so you need to understand the complex trauma piece if you ever hope to deal with the codependency piece in your life. And so that's why I want to look at this topic, but I want to look at it from the perspective of complex trauma so that you'll more clearly see the issues that need to change and be dealt with if you ever hope to really deal with the codependency piece. What you're probably going to find is that this is going to get really heavy for you at times. And there's going to be times where you're going to say, I am so screwed up, I just want to end it now. There's no hope for me, because you're going to see some of your relationships put into words, and you're going to wonder if I've been following you around and had a video camera on your relationships for the last 20 years, because you're going to think I'm going to post your picture on the screen up here as an example of codependency. That's how personal this will get for you. But then it's going to get painful because you're going to see the damage it's done to your kids as well. But I don't want to just take you to a painful realizations. I want this to turn into tools so you can heal and develop healthy relationships. So let me start by just helping you get an intro to the topic tonight. And I just want to show how codependency comes out of complex trauma. So complex trauma, in my mind, the greatest piece of damage that it does is in a person's sense of their identity. So it does in a child who is neglected and abused and abandoned. They think the reason dad is neglecting me or abusing me is because there's something wrong with me. And they draw conclusions about their identity that I must not be good enough, I must not be lovable, otherwise dad wouldn't abuse me or neglect me or abandon me. And so complex trauma produces this core identity called shame. And that is what does the greatest amount of damage in my mind when it comes to understanding complex trauma. Now take a child with shame thinking it's all my fault, and then put them in a situation where they're trying to survive and stay safe. And what comes out of that is it makes a healthy relationship impossible. So complex trauma takes the possibility of healthy relationships and it makes it impossible because of shame and because of being in survival mode. And so anybody coming out of complex trauma knows how to have a kind of relationship, but it's not a healthy one. And that is where the damage happens. And so what comes out of that is they go into relationships, but they don't know how to make them healthy, and they only get wounded over and over again. So the very thing they're trying to do is keep safe. They are now actually producing the opposite. They're setting up relationships where they keep getting hurt. And that is, to me, part of the huge negative effect of complex trauma as it spreads beyond the person into relationships. Okay, let me begin with a basic definition. And this isn't mine. I'm just taking it kind of from a textbook point. And then I'm going to, over the next weeks, just start coming at it from all kinds of different angles. And if you know me, you know we're going to come at it from at least 20 different angles in order to get a better and better understanding of this thing called codependency. So, a basic definition says a codependent relationship involves one person supporting or trying to solve the other person's problems. So it's all about people trying to solve each other's problems, meet their needs, mainly their self-esteem needs and their emotional needs, okay? That's part one. Part two, what that means then is that one person or both person, but mainly one person, ends up becoming an enabler of the other person's unhealthy behavior. So you're trying to support them, but what you're supporting is them being immature and irresponsible, and you're cleaning up their mess after them, trying to solve their problems and fix them, but you're giving them permission to never grow up. And so you end up with relationships that are much like a parent and a child, and they drive you crazy. And so you are supporting unhealthy behaviors, not healthy behaviors. And then what happens with that is the enabler becomes totally occupied with solving the other person's problems and trying to meet their needs, that they totally lose track of their own needs. And they are living without their own needs being met, and they don't even know how to meet their own needs. So they're dying inside, trying to give life to somebody else who doesn't want life. And that is the disaster that comes out of codependency gradually. So what you're going to see is codependency is like addiction. It gradually gets worse and worse and worse, and those in it get sicker and sicker and sicker. So the longer you stay in a codependent relationship, the worse you get, the worse they get, and the sicker you both get and everybody around you. And so that is the basic definition. So I say there's a couple things about addiction that therefore are involved with codependency. Number one, codependency can be you're addicted to a person. So they're your crack pipe. They're the person that you are saying, make me feel alive. Solve all my pain problems. Solve all my emptiness. Give me life. You're my crack pipe. And you become addicted to them. So like the addiction, even when it gets to the point that you know your crack pipe is no longer giving you positive experiences, but is only making your life a living hell, you can't let go. And the same is true in codependency. This person is becoming more and more toxic and destroying you, but can you get rid of them? You're addicted to them. And so that is the first part. Second part, it's also you're addicted to an unhealthy way of relating, even a destructive way of relating. So it's an addiction to a relationship style that isn't healthy. And that's what we're going to be developing over time. But here's what I want you to see. If you look at the necessary ingredients for a healthy relationship, honesty, trust, respect, you don't find those in codependency. So the very thing necessary, the very ingredients necessary for a healthy relationship, what happens in a codependent relationship? You're trying to have a healthy relationship without those ingredients. And it's impossible. But people will keep trying. The third thing that I think is a great summary statement is codependency is how a shame-based person approaches relationships. And that's what I want to develop now in helping you get the core explanation and understanding of what codependency is. So let me take you back to a simple definition of complex trauma that you may never have thought of before. Complex trauma always happens in a situation, usually home, where the person with the most power is a narcissist. And they make it all about them. So they want everything to go the way they want it to go. They want everybody to respond to their needs, to their emotions, to their wants, and they want everybody's life to revolve around them. That's what creates complex trauma, because now that person who's the narcissist abuses the people that don't do stuff that they want. It neglects people because it's all preoccupied with its own needs. And it abandons people to pursue its own selfish pursuits. So complex trauma always takes place with a narcissist in power. What we're going to see next week, and I'm actually going to give you a test, is codependent relationships usually always have a narcissist. And that is the thing that makes up a codependent relationship. So then what happens when a child has a dad who's a narcissist? Dad is all about his own needs, and when the kid has a need, what does dad say to the kid? Quit being so selfish. And he makes the child feel bad for having a need. He makes the child feel guilty for having a need. So now the child feels shame because dad's abusing them and not giving them attention, and they conclude it must be my fault. I must not be lovable. I must not be good enough. And then dad says you're selfish for having needs. So that's a double whammy so far that comes out of that narcissist. One way to look at a definition of what is shame, it is the dis-ease of self. And what that means is you're not comfortable in your own skin. You don't like yourself. You're uneasy with who you are. And as a result of that, you don't have any positive feelings about yourself. So many of you can go back in your mind to childhood and remember many days sitting on the swing or in your room feeling no positive feelings to yourself, hating yourself, feeling unlovable, not valuable, the shame piece, okay? So the child then is going, their brain is going, I don't want to stay in these painful feelings. What do I need to do to fix it? So here's what you have to understand next. The brain doesn't go, I need to fix my inside, because it's concluded my inside is bad. So where is the solution going to come from? I don't have any positive feelings about myself, so the only way I can feel good about myself is if others have positive feelings towards me. And then I'll piggyback on their positive feelings towards me. There is where codependency begins. You are looking outside yourself to make yourself feel better as a way to deal with your shame without dealing with it internally. This solution will never work. But that is the belief behind all of codependency. So let me develop that further. So then what the child says is this: how do I prove that I'm lovable? How do I convince myself that I'm lovable? Well, I just have to be in a relationship with somebody, and that proves that they want to be in relationship with me, which proves I must be valuable and lovable. So therefore, to prove I'm lovable, I got to be in a relationship all the time. Because if I'm not in a relationship, that proves nobody wants me, and that therefore proves that I'm not lovable. So now I have to be in a relationship. And some of you understand that. I've had many clients who, when they know a relationship's about to die, they don't end it till they got somebody else waiting. And then they end this one and move right into the next. Because they can't be alone. Because being alone proves to them their greatest fear, that they are unlovable. So then the next thing is, now you're in a relationship. So how do I get them to see value in me? I have to solve their problems. I have to help them. So now you go into a relationship as either a helper who's going to be a hero and rescue somebody. And then when you rescue them, they're going to go, oh, I adore you. I love you. You're so wonderful. And you're getting all kinds of positive validation. And you go, this is the perfect solution to my shame problem. Or you go to, I'm so needy. I got so many problems. I'm never going to take responsibility for myself. Please rescue me. And you get all these knights in shining armor come swooping in and give you all this attention and rescue you. And you go, this is fantastic. I'm going to be a needy-aholic for the rest of my life. Because I get attention. Why should I ever move off the pity pot? Because I get all this attention. This is a solution. So now what you see is you've got a helper and a needy person as the basis of a relationship. So that's where codependency begins. Okay, now we go further. So you got this person in a relationship. You go, I got to be happy all the time. Because if I'm sad, they might get tired of me and leave me. If I ever get angry at them, they might go, screw you, and be gone. Or if I let them in to see the real me, they go, who are you screwed up? I'm gone. So I got to put this perfect mask of being happy all the time. That's the only way they will keep loving me. So you realize what you just did? You went from being a human to being a one-emotion person who's a fake. Because that's what you think you need to get positive attention. You think if you're real, you will never get positive validation. But then you go further in your thinking, and that is, not only do I have to be happy, I got to keep them happy. Because if they ever get disappointed or angry at me, they might leave me. Or if they're ever sad, they might just get depressed with the relationship and leave me. So the only way they're going to keep giving me positive validation is if I'm happy, but I got to keep them happy. So what does that mean? I can't be happy unless they're happy. My happiness now depends on them being happy. So therefore, my priority now is I'm going to take responsible for their emotional world. And if they got a problem, I'll fix it for them just so they'll stay happy. If they're angry, I'll calm them down and fix everything up just so they're happy. So now they don't have to grow up at all. They can stay an angry, immature kid, but I will fix all their problems just so they're happy, so they keep giving me positive attention. That's the only way I can solve this. And so now you got somebody sitting around saying, do this for me, I'm mad at you, and the other person's running around fixing everything so they stay happy. The room got really quiet, so I think maybe we're hitting home. The next thing that then happens is, if I'm going to keep them happy, I better develop a radar system that is alert to their every mood. So that the minute they're don't even wait till they walk in the door. I can tell by the way they drive down the driveway what kind of mood they're in. And I can tell by the way they shut the door what kind of mood they're in. So I'm going to have this radar that is more aware of their world than of my world. I'm going to have a radar that knows their every emotion and that can even maybe read their mind once in a while, but I don't have a clue what I feel or think. I'm plugged into them. So now my identity is a reflection of theirs. So I'm no longer a person, I'm just a reflection of them. You following what's happening here? As this progresses. Now, what will happen if you have a child who says, Dad's a selfish jerk. I'm not going to go running whenever he gets angry. And you're the enabler who's got to keep Dad happy. What are you going to do now? You're going to beat your kid up and say, quit being so selfish. And you're going to say, you got to keep Dad happy. And you're training your child to be codependent. And you're punishing them for trying to be real. And so what happens in those families is that the enabler isn't just trying to keep Dad happy, it's making all the kids cooperate with the program. And that is what does a bunch of damage as well. Okay, now you got to go to the next thing. So in order to keep them happy all the time, that means I have to be willing to sacrifice all my needs and all my desires. Because they don't matter anymore. All that matters is their desires if they're going to keep happy. So I will sacrifice my needs and I'll put them on the shelf. And what happens then is if I feel a need and express a need, I feel guilty for expressing a need. And I train myself to feel guilty for having needs. So I sacrifice that. But then this son in the center of the universe, the narcissist, he demands more of your attention. And he says, I can't be convinced that you love me unless you have no friends and no family. So I'm going to start cutting out your friends and your family and your activities so I'm the only person in your world. And you want to know what you do? You go ahead with it. And you sacrifice all of that as well. And then he's going to say, you should put up with my anger. I'm just having a bad day. You should put up with me hitting you. You probably deserved it. And now you keep moving the line in the sand to tolerate more and more, to sacrifice your values and your morals more and more. Now you start lying for them. You start covering for them. You're breaking your own moral conduct to keep them happy. So you are getting sicker and sicker to accommodate their growing narcissism. And then what you can see comes out of all of this is the narcissist is the superior and you are definitely inferior. They look down on you. They see you as a servant. They don't even treat you with respect, but they demand respect from you. So there is a dynamic relationship change where there's no longer equals here. This is a relationship of a superior narcissist and an inferior person. Beyond that, a healthy relationship over time, both parties make sacrifices about 50% of the time. Both parties, one person gets their kind of what they want to do one day, the other person another day, and it balances out to about 50%. So if you were to go to Bermuda with Kim and I, there were some days Kim did what I wanted, there are other days I did what she wanted. Because that's just what you do. But not in a codependent relationship. Now one person gets their way 100% of the time, and the other person gets their way 0% of the time. And that is not healthy. But there's always within the codependent hope that they will change. And you stay in it and stay in it. Okay, that's a lot of heavy stuff. And I just want to keep going very quickly. So a child wasn't taught in complex trauma how to meet their own needs in a healthy way. That's number one. So I'm just adding now to how complex trauma affects children and sets them up for codependency. So they weren't taught how to meet their own needs. Okay? Their parents didn't meet their needs. So their own needs are something they're very out of touch with. And they don't have a clue how to be aware of them or how to meet them. All they know is how to set them aside and meet somebody else's needs. Next thing, complex trauma is all about a child feeling unsafe and alone. Nobody having their back, nobody protecting them. So what happens is in order to stay safe physically, you have to squash all the things that are necessary for a healthy relationship. To stay safe physically, you don't talk, you don't feel, you don't trust. You don't do the things necessary for a healthy relationship. So complex trauma, the need for safety squashes healthy out of a child. Now in adult life, you come into relationships and you don't know how to do healthy. You still operate by don't trust, don't talk, be dishonest, lie. All of those things are there. So the very strategies necessary to survive as a child make healthy relationships impossible. So here's an important summary for you. Codependency develops in an emotionally abusive environment with a narcissist being abusive. And it develops in an emotionally dishonest environment because the enabler is never going to get honest about how things really are. And so a child is growing up in an environment that is emotionally abusive and emotionally dishonest. So how are they going to learn to be emotionally honest and emotionally healthy? They didn't have that taught to them, so they set that aside in their life. So here's a quote that I love. Soul wounds, so again, emotional wounds are what take place in an emotionally abusive environment. Soul wounds do not heal if ignored. And what I want you to understand with that is a lot of people coming out of complex trauma say, why deal with that? That's in the past. And what this is saying is you can ignore those wounds, but it's still going to mess up your relationships today. So soul wounds do not heal if you ignore them. They continue to shape and govern our emotions, our self-image, our ways of interacting in relationship long beyond the childhood in which they were received. Shame does damage far beyond the original dysfunction because it has damaged the wounded souls unintentionally continue to perpetrate on themselves. It is a kind of soul murder. What it's saying is this: if you don't deal with your soul wounds, guess what? You're going to get in relationships and you're going to wound yourself. And you're going to murder your own soul. And in other words, what it is saying is complex trauma, you develop a system that lets you survive physically, but it murders your soul. You're physically alive, soul dead. That's what comes out of complex trauma. And so when you go into a relationship physically alive, soul dead, it's impossible not just to have a healthy relationship, but it's impossible not to wound each other and yourself further. And you do even further damage. So somebody has said, codependency is the dance of wounded souls. And I think that says it very well. Another person has said, codependency is using relationships today to try and meet emotional needs not met in childhood. I said to the clients this week, what many of you will probably find is you're going to wake up one morning and you say, I think I married my mom, or I think I married my dad. Because I'm still looking for them to validate me and meet my needs today. And I married somebody that was like them without realizing it, hoping they would solve my soul wounds. And they won't. They will just make it worse. So an attempt to heal one's shame by ignoring your internal world and focusing on finding Mr. Perfect does not work. But that's what that's what codependency is all about trying to do. So that's just a taste of codependency. For the Christian part, one of the things that we've been really building on do you realize it's a year ago that we started at Riverwood here? So we've been working at this for about a year, but we've been really focusing on what does it mean to have a relationship with God? What does it mean to trust God? What's this living by faith in God? And part of the challenge for people coming out of complex trauma is for many of them, they experienced spiritual abuse. And so to them, God's not a trustworthy person. And so one of the things I decided I was going to do for a couple weeks is some of the issues that people have when it comes to trusting God, partly because of distortions they've received from other Christians. And it just gets me really upset, and often I'll break into rants that some of you will find amusing, others it gets me in trouble. But I get really upset with a lot of the damage that churches and Christians have done as far as how they've explained God to people. So tonight, what I want to do is talk about probably the most common distortion people get through a church environment, and that is that God is an angry God. And you will get verses about God's anger or God's wrath, and that is used to prove that this God is an angry God, and therefore you should fear him because of his anger. Do you realize that what that does is it makes church like a dysfunctional complex trauma family? How do you motivate children in a complex trauma family? You put fear into them. How do you motivate children in a healthy family? You put love into them. How does it work within a church when you want to get people to follow God? You put fear into them. And that makes it a sick place. And so that has done so much damage that I want to talk about that, because it leads to the next thing. And that is, you need to be afraid. I grew up hearing, oh, be careful, little hands, what you do, because there's a Father up above looking down in peace and love. Well, I didn't hear there's a Father up above looking down in peace and love. I heard there's a Father up above, and if he's looking down, and if you do something bad, you better watch out. Because he could just bring out his baseball bat and just smack you really good just because you pissed him off that day. And so that was this God with an unpredictable anger who lashed out in judgment at times on a whim. And that was the environment that I suspect some of you were raised in. I say to people all the time that I would guess, based on what I do here in Manitoba, that probably 25% of the people I work with have been given a picture of God like that, and that is spiritual abuse. Because now what does that narcissist dad do? He says, here's a Bible verse that says you better do what I'm telling you to do, or else God's not only am I going to judge you, God's going to judge you. So now I got God on my side, so you better be afraid. And that creates complex trauma. So here's the first thing you need to understand. When you read through the Bible, what you're going to find is there's two types of God's anger that are talked about. So let me back you up and give you this. If you don't know me, I went to church even before I was born, when I was in my mom's womb. I went to church minimum of 5 times a week ever since I was a newborn. So I was raised in church, and I was raised in kind of the normal Christian teachings of Western society. I bought into all of that until I became very ill, and I went into a deep depression that lasted almost 10 years. And all of a sudden, all of those things that I was taught didn't work. And so I had to back away from the Christianity that I was raised with and go, most of that I don't believe anymore. It doesn't work. I need to find out what works. And that caused me to reread the Bible through the eyes of pain and the eyes of depression and the eyes of unresolved physical problems. And all of a sudden, the Bible took on a whole new meaning to me because I saw it through the eyes that the original recipients of the Bible read it from. Do you realize that the Bible wasn't written for people in comfortable places? It was written for people who were in pain. And as you read it, all of a sudden, everything you see differently. And one of the first things I began to see was we've misunderstood God's anger. And we've used God's anger in an abusive way that God never designed. So the first part of God's anger is what I call passive anger. So here's how it works. Sometimes when it says God is angry at people, it doesn't mean he's up there saying, oh, I just want to get them. What it means is this. When he designed life, he says, I am going to create life so that if you live within the boundaries of love, in a healthy design, you're going to get positive consequences. You're going to experience positive emotions, positive relationships, and many blessings. If you step outside of those boundaries and start to lie and start to be abusive, guess what you're going to get? Pain. Now that's the first way of describing God's anger is nothing more than the natural consequences that God built into unloving actions. So God's not up in heaven doing anything. He just built it into how life is designed. Now think about it further. Why did God put painful consequences if you step outside of love? Is it so you go, oh God, you're a mean God? No, it's say, oh, I need to get back inside of healthy. Because if I stay outside of here, it's going to be pain and it's going to become hell on earth. But if I get back inside of healthy, I'll get back to joy and blessing. So actually, negative consequences that feel like God is angry are actually God loving you, saying, I don't want you out here because it'll destroy you. I want to make this super uncomfortable so you'll come back to what I designed. So all of that pain comes out of a loving heart. So that's not even anger. That's a loving God trying to stop people from destroying themselves. So that's the first thing you need to understand. So if you now read through the Bible and you read every time you see God's anger, guess what you're going to see most of the time? It's nothing more than painful consequences that are built into life. Now let me take that further. In Romans 1, there's a passage that says, people step outside of God's design, and they basically said, we're not going to submit to God, surrender to God. We want to be our own boss, so we're going to do it our way. We think God's rules are designed to take the fun out of life. We think fun is outside of God's design, so we're going to go out there. And they did that, and they got pain. But instead of going back to inside, it says they hardened their heart. And they got more rebellious. And many of you understand that. And so they said, we're going to go even further outside of God's design because we think there'll be happiness there. And so it says God gave them up. He says, I don't want you to do that. I'm trying to bring you back through painful consequences. You're hardening your heart, so I'll let you go. I'll let you go like a parent would a rebellious child and says, you're not going to learn from me telling you or giving you consequences. Okay, go ahead. And you're going to find out it's not like you thought it's going to be. And so God gives them up to their own will. I'll give you what you want, even though I know it will destroy you, because you won't listen to what I say is best for you. So that is not a God who's angry saying, I'm going to punish you. It's a God who has a breaking heart. It's a God who is saying, don't do this. But the only way you're going to learn your way doesn't work is the pain has to get so bad that you finally stop and say, maybe I'm not the smartest person in the world. And that's the only way some of us learn, and you know all about that. So that is not an angry God. That is a loving God, but painful consequences sometimes feel like anger. And so that's why it's called that. The second thing is there are just a few occasions in the Bible where God moved in active judgment and he wiped out some people. Okay? So just to give you, there's two things I want you to understand with that. The first is, so if, let's say my wife had terrible cancer, and she went in yesterday, and the surgeon said, you know what, I should probably cut all of that out, but I'm going to be nice. I don't want to cause her any pain, so I'll just put a Band-Aid over top of it. That's not a loving doctor. A loving doctor would do radical surgery. And so the times when you see God wipe out people, he's wiping out a cancer that would destroy the earth. Okay? That's part one. Part two. When you see the times, and I'm going to give you the three examples, when God did wipe it out, what you find it was the last thing he wanted to do, and he only did it when nobody else would listen, when every single person hardened their heart. So in 2 Peter 3, it says this, the Lord is not slow in keeping his promise. Instead, he is patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish. In other words, the last thing God wants to do is judge. That is what he will avoid as long as possible. He wants everybody to come back inside a healthy. So that is the heart desire of God. So that's important because God's not up there saying, I'm so mad I can't wait to beat somebody up. God is up there saying, the last thing I want to do is judge a person. What more could I try to help bring them back? And so he will try all kinds of different things to bring them back. Okay, so let me give you example number one. Genesis 6, Noah and the flood. Okay? So basically, the story goes, God said to Noah, build an ark, get 2 of all the animals, because I'm going to wipe out the world. Why? Because everybody is living, eat, drink, and be merry. What does that mean? They're only living to indulge every selfish desire they have. They are no longer loving. This world has become unsafe and destructive because everybody is totally self-centered. And so I have to cut out this cancer. But then he says this, I don't want to. So there's a very interesting thing. I don't know if you remember from Sunday school, but we used to get the oldest person in the Bible was one of the quizzes. And it's a guy by the name of Methuselah. And that'll be on the test, Methuselah. But he lived to be 969 years old. So that was the oldest guy that ever lived. Do you want to know what Methuselah's name means? When he dies, it will come. And if you go through the story, there's a genealogy. And what you find is you go through it, the year Methuselah died, the flood came. When he dies, it will come. But that's interesting to me because he was the oldest guy that ever lived. And so it's like this saying, God saying, I don't want to judge the world yet. You know what? I'm going to let Methuselah live another year. The next year, oh, I just don't want to judge them yet. I want to give them another chance. I'll let them live another year. And then he lived another year and another year. And what you see in that is God is doing everything to prevent having to judge people. He's giving every possible chance. The next time it happens is in Genesis 19, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, where fire, it said, came down from heaven. I've been to where Sodom and Gomorrah was. There was a huge volcanic eruption, which would have been the fire from heaven, that wiped out the entire city, kind of like a Pompeii. And so it's not actually even God doing stuff. It's a natural disaster that just happened to work at that time to wipe out that messed up people. But what is important is this. In Genesis 19, God comes to Abraham and he says, I got to cut out the cancer of Sodom and Gomorrah. And so it says this, the Lord said to Abraham, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, their sin so grievous, that I'm going to come down and see if what they have done is bad as the outcry that has reached me. Then Abraham says this, he starts to argue with God. And it's important to understand that God's okay if we argue with him, okay? As long as we listen. But he says, will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? So what he's thinking and fearing is you're going to destroy that, but there's going to be all kinds of people still that want to follow you. Would you come down and wipe out all these people? And I get bothered at times when people say, Jesus is coming back tomorrow, and he's going to do this judgment. I go, really? There's so many people still that I see with open hearts that just haven't heard yet. I don't see him up there ready to come and do that, but that's Abraham's concern. So he says, will you spare the people if there's 50 good people still left? And God says, no, if there's 50 people left, I will spare the whole place. Then he says, okay, how about 45? And God says, no, I won't judge it. Okay, how about 40? And they go in this argument, how about 30? How about 20? How about 10? And God said, if there's 10 people, I will not wipe this out. So what he is saying is, there's not even one. Well, there was one, Lot. But that's all. So I am only wiping it out because there's nobody left with an open heart. If there is anybody left with an open heart, more than that Lot, I would give them another chance. And so what you see is that the judgment doesn't come until everybody within that culture has closed their heart to God. And they are no longer open to being to God at all. And then the final one, very quickly, in Genesis 15, Israel comes out of Egypt, we've talked about, and they're going to this land that God has promised. And what God says is, I'm going to have you go into that land and engage in battle, and you're going to wipe out a lot of people in battle, okay? So here's the logic behind it. Know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and that they will be enslaved and mistreated there. So Israel was slaves in Egypt for 400 years. In the fourth generation, your descendants will come back here. Why are you taking them out of here, putting them for 400 years in a foreign culture, in a protected bubble? He says this, because the Amorites' wickedness has not reached its full measure. And what he is saying is, they're bad right now, and if I let you live amongst them, they'd corrupt you. So I'm going to take you out to protect you. But the reason I'm doing that is I don't want to judge them right away because I want to keep giving them a chance. Well, how long are you going to keep giving them a chance? 400 years. Wow, that's a lot of patience. And so God doesn't wipe that out until he gives them 400 extra years of chance, and he puts his people in slavery to take them away from all of that corruption, and then he brings them back. So those three examples, what you begin to realize is we don't have this angry God who's always, his temper's flaring. We don't have a God who's quick to judge people and wipe them out. We get the exact opposite picture in the Bible. And that is so important for people who have received spiritual abuse to understand. So God gives these people tons and tons of warnings and lots of time. So let me quickly, what does God do to try to get people's attention? He gives you a conscience. So you tell a lie and it bugs you like crazy. And then he gives parents, and their design is to help keep you in healthy. Complex trauma, they don't do that very well. Then he gives you a government called police and all of that who are supposed to try and make laws that help you stay in healthy and know that it's painful to go outside of healthy. Cultures get that all messed up too. And then there's the natural consequences outside of that. All of those four things are designed by God to get people's attention that it pays to be inside of healthy. Okay? So that's what he does. And then he doesn't judge until he gives them every possible opportunity. Jesus, when he came on the scene, the whole mindset of the religion was of an angry God. And so they lived in fear of this angry God, that you had to be careful that you made enough sacrifices to keep him happy. And if you ever broke a rule, you had to run and make a couple sacrifices to get him to not judge you. And Jesus comes on the scene, and basically, as you read through his teaching, through these eyes that I've given you tonight, you begin to see that what he was doing is saying, I want to give you a whole new understanding of God. He is not this angry God. And he tells the story of the prodigal son. And it's a son who does this. He says, Dad, give me my inheritance now. And dads didn't give their inheritance to their children till they died. And what he was saying is, Dad, I wish you were dead. And then it says he goes to a foreign country and he does the exact opposite of what his dad stood for. So in other words, he flipped his dad the bird and he says, I want nothing to do with you. I'm going to do everything I can to break your heart and do it outside of your design. Now the Jews listening to that would think that father is going to be so angry at that son, he would never forgive him, never allow him to come back, because he's going to punish him, and he's going to punish him big time. And Jesus says, that's not what happened. And so he goes out of his way. So you have to understand, in that time it was a shame-based culture, and what that meant was a man, especially an older man, never did anything in public that would mess up his image. You always carried yourself very circumspectly. So that meant an older man would never run. He would never hug somebody in public, never kiss somebody in public, because you had to look good. And so when this man, whose sons trashed him and done the exact opposite and wished he was dead, when he sees him coming up the road, guess what he does? He runs, he hugs him, and he kisses him, and then he throws a party for him. And what he is saying to the people is, this is the exact opposite God of what you were taught. And that is what I want you to hear, is if you got that other God, get rid of that. That's what Jesus was about, was to destroy that old view of God that is part of a complex trauma, spiritual abuse world, and begin to understand that God's anger is totally a different thing. And the God is a loving God and a forgiving God.